All right, so this is the recap of week one. And in these recap videos, I just want to get to some of the essential points, both good points and perhaps errors that you've made in those discussions. And so for week one, you had three discussion board options. One was Irish knowledge. What do you know about the islands? And got some really good stuff and some really interesting facts there. So hopefully you checked them out. The other two posts were more concerned with the text that we were using, and using these texts to understand something about Ireland's place in the world and its history. And one thing that I noticed most of you doing, maybe all of you, but certainly most of you, is you made the mistake of thinking that what Cahill and Duty were doing is there to bash the Irish and there to say that the Irish were worthless and that they were secondary and they didn't matter. And what they're doing, in fact, is somewhat the opposite. What they're trying to say, in different ways, but what they're both trying to do is to argue that there's something very worthwhile about the Irish. There's something really valuable that the Irish have contributed to Western civilization. Again, they do it in different ways, but that is a kind of a shared goal. So when you guys were concerned they were just bashing the Irish, what they were really doing is looking both at the facts of Irish history as well as some of the objections to their own position. And these objections to their own position are essentially saying, look, the Irish are not worth our time. The Irish are not worth looking into. There's nothing really good that has come out of Ireland, at least in terms of Western intellectual history. Okay, and so what does Cahill do? Well, Cahill says the Irish, in fact, at least for one moment in their history, were at the leading edge of Western civilization. They were at the forefront of Western civilization. In fact, they saved Western civilization. And he argues this is now forgotten. We don't attribute it to the Irish. We don't thank the Irish. We don't recognize the Irish for this. But what they did was essentially saved Western literary tradition and philosophic tradition in the face of collapse, in the face of barbarians, in the face of groups of people that were just about going through Europe and destroying civilization and burning things and taking riches and destroying what they could. And in the face of that, the Irish wrote down and preserved quite a bit of the literary and philosophic texts that continue to shape us today, and that are some of the finest examples of thinking in Western intellectual history. And they also began a tradition of preserving your own national heritage, stories, and philosophy. And so for that, Cahill thinks we have much to thank the Irish for. But it is interesting. Some of you may come back and you say, Cahill, you're still not giving the Irish enough credit. Because essentially what Cahill says is they've had this one moment of history when they shined, when they were the leaders, when they were the definition of civilization. But after that, the Vikings attacked, and following subsequent invasions, the Irish really, he says, just as a matter of fact, have been a third world country. Generally, that's how they've been treated. Generally, they've been looked down upon, forgotten, abused, so on and so forth. And he's not saying this is right, but he's saying this is in fact what happens. Now, Duty, on the other hand, he's saying, look, it's not just this one moment, but there's a number and a series of really important Irish thinkers and really quality, original philosophizing in science and literature that's going on. And what he says is that this is often forgotten because of a number of reasons. And these are the objections that people are going to raise. One objection is there's no Irish history, there's no Irish thoughts, there's no, nothing distinctively Irish. And he says that's true if you're thinking about it from the perspective of a colonial power. From the perspective of a nation that has a stable history, a history of power, a history where different individuals can kind of relate to each other as Spanish, or as English, or as Greek, or as Egyptian, and they're all part of this one continuous heritage. What happens in Ireland is you've got a series of invasions. So you continually have these people kind of coming in and changing things and destroying what was in the past and introducing new ideas and new thoughts. And he says, look, there's also a history there. It's just that we don't often those that are in power really take time to care about it, because those in power are concerned about themselves, not about what's happening to those that are dominated. And Duty says that is precisely one of the really valuable things about Irish intellectual history. They can teach us about what it's like to be abused, oppressed, forgotten, marginalized. So the idea that there's no truly Irish, or there's not many truly Irish thinkers, in the sense that really many of these thinkers that he's claiming are Irish are of British descent, that they're really kind of English, they just kind of came over, but they're not really Irish. And Duty's response is, well, that's going to happen anytime you have a nation that is colonized. Anytime you have a nation where there's huge population shifts, people are going to happen to find themselves born into this different country. But that's one of the characteristics of this kind of nation. So those are the response to the objections, but both are saying there's something valuable that the Irish have contributed, and both are also, though, recognizing, and this is undeniable, they're saying that Ireland and the Irish people have been abused and have been forgotten, and you can't get rid of that. The second discussion board question that asked you to kind of really think about the text was this question of whether the Irish, or what do the Irish and the Americans share? And it's true that both nations have seen massive population shifts and changes. We began with Native Americans, and then the European settlers came in, and all these different groups of Europeans, and now obviously we have a huge populations of Mexicans, Latin Americans, so on and so forth. And so America, like Ireland, has seen its people change and mix with other groups and mix with other cultures. And that is, in a certain sense, what is exciting about the heritages of both America and Ireland. We don't tend to think of the Irish as multicultural because we're not over there. We just think of them as one kind of solid, uniform group, but they're not. And so that's something that we learned from Cahill and Duty. But there's also, some really big differences here. And one of the big differences is that Ireland has not enjoyed the power that America has. We as Americans have really shaped the world for much of our history. For a lot of our history, we've been in charge. Or at least if we've not been in charge, people have to take us seriously. In Ireland, that's not the case. In America, many times people are coming here because they see opportunity. They see the possibility of a better life. They want to come here. For Ireland, many times people are coming there for the opportunity to pillage and to colonize and to dominate a group of people that were already there. And Ireland has also seen huge exoduses of people. They've had massive population losses because the Irish people wanted to go somewhere else. Or at least many of them did. In America, we have not experienced that. On the same token, I don't want to call too many people out by name, but Alex Rattel brought up this really good point where he said, look, even in America, we've had these populations that have been forgotten, have been oppressed, have been marginalized. The Native Americans were invaded and were conquered and were abused and were taken advantage of. Certainly, many of the African Americans that are here have their origin in Africa, where they were brought over as slaves. Certainly that's a group that was oppressed and didn't enjoy all the opportunities that America has had. So within this nation of great power and prestige and wealth, it's good to point out that we also have had populations that have experienced something more like what the Irish have experienced. More the experience of being dominated and forgotten and second-rate and been dehumanized, not really looked upon as true human beings. Okay, so that is the kind of the recap for this week, and look forward to what you have to say for this next week.